As Nero's personal scribe, you're about to document the most insane Olympic Games in history, and somehow you'll survive to tell the tale. You're hunched over your writing desk again, ink permanently staining your fingertips black when Emperor Nero bursts through the door with that particular gleam in his eyes. Not the gleam that means someone's getting executed, though that's always possible, but the gleam that means he's had what he calls a divine inspiration. These inspirations have previously included rebuilding half of Rome in gold, commissioning a statue of himself as tall as a mountain, and that unfortunate incident where he tried to make the Mediterranean Sea fresh water. So when he announces he wants to compete in the Olympics, you actually feel relieved. How bad could this possibly be? "Scribe," he declares, striking a pose that would make marble weep. "Prepare the scrolls. I shall enter the Olympic Games and claim victory in every single event." You blink. Every event. All of them. The wrestling, the running, the chariot racing, the javelin throwing, the discus, the boxing, the horse racing, and, because this is Nero, the artistic competitions too. Poetry recitation, lyre playing, tragic acting, and whatever other cultural events he can wedge his imperial posterior into. "My lord," you venture carefully, "perhaps we could start with just one or two events. The Greeks are quite particular about their athletic traditions, and—" "Particular?" Nero's voice rises to that pitch that makes small animals flee. "I am the Emperor of Rome. I am beloved of Apollo. I am the most magnificent specimen of human achievement ever to grace this earthly realm. The Greeks should be honoured, nay, blessed, to witness my divine excellence." And that's when he asks the question that will haunt your dreams for years to come. Can we add heroism as a competitive category? I feel I would dominate that as well. You laugh. It's a short, sharp bark of disbelief that escapes before you can stop it. Nero doesn't laugh. His eyes narrow to slits that could cut papyrus. The temperature in the room seems to drop several degrees, and you suddenly remember that this is the man who once had his own mother killed for giving him fashion advice. "I see," he says quietly. "You doubt my heroic capabilities." "Not at all, my lord," you stammer, frantically dipping your stylus. "I was simply overwhelmed by the brilliance of the concept. Heroism as an Olympic event, truly revolutionary. I shall begin drafting the proposal immediately." Nero's expression shifts back to its usual megalomaniacal cheer. "Excellent! And while you're at it, rewrite Homer's Iliad. I want Achilles to be me, Hector to be me, Paris to be me, Helen to be me. Everyone, really. The whole Trojan War. But it's just me fighting myself in various glorious poses." You stare at your stylus. You've been the imperial scribe for 3 years now, and you've written some absurd things. Royal decrees declaring Nero's bathwater to be a cure for baldness. Official proclamations that his singing could resurrect the dead. A formal letter to Jupiter demanding better weather for Nero's garden parties. But rewriting the Iliad as a one-man show, this is new territory even for you. Shall I include the gods as well, my lord? Zeus, Athene, Apollo? Oh yes, absolutely. I'll play all of them too. Apollo especially. We're practically twins, you know. Same divine radiance, same perfect bone structure, same ability to inspire religious fervour through artistic expression. You begin scribbling furiously. If you're going to survive this madness, you need to embrace it completely. Within an hour, you've produced the opening lines. "Sing, Muse, of Nero Achilles, son of Nero Peleus, whose rage, justified and magnificent, brought countless glorious victories to the Nero Greeks, while Nero Hector, equally magnificent, defended the Nero Greeks with valour that was also Nero Exquor in its perfection." But the Iliad revision is just the beginning. Nero has bigger plans, much bigger. "We must ensure that all of Greece loves me before I even arrive," he announces, pacing around your cramped office like a caged leopard in a toga. "I want statues erected in every major city depicting my athletic prowess. Commission the best sculptors. Spare no expense. I want to be shown throwing javelins that pierce the clouds, wrestling bears, running so fast my feet barely touch the ground." "Bears, my lord?" "Metaphorical bears. The bears of adversity, of challenge, of lesser athletic ability. Though if we can find some actual bears for me to wrestle, that would be even better. Make a note. Investigate bear procurement. You make the note, though you pray to every god you know that the bear situation remains metaphorical. The last thing Rome needs is Nero attempting to wrestle actual wildlife. The statue commissions go out immediately. Within days, artists across the empire are receiving scrolls demanding depictions of Nero in various impossible athletic poses. One sculptor writes back, asking if the emperor really wants to be shown jumping over the Parthenon. You write back, higher. But statues are just the beginning. Nero has discovered the concept of gifts for Olympic judges. Not bribes, he insists, gifts. Generous, thoughtful, bankruptcy-inducing gifts. Each judge should receive something that demonstrates our appreciation for their expertise, Nero explains while examining a list of precious stones. Perhaps a villa in Gaul, some choice slaves. Oh, I know. Let's give them entire provinces. My lord, you say carefully, giving away provinces might upset the governors currently running them. Then we'll give the governors something better. Everyone wins. I am a genius of diplomacy. You spend the next week drafting gift certificates for Olympic judges. Judge Apollodorus of Athens, 1 villa, 3 vineyards, and a small mountain. Judge Theophilus of Sparta, a fleet of ships, a gold mine, and exclusive rights to a trade route. Judge Nicias of Corinth, an entire city, Ephesus, plus its surrounding farmland, plus a dozen prize racehorses. The judges, naturally, are thrilled. Letters of gratitude pour in, each more obsequious than the last. Divine Nero, writes one, your generosity has moved me to tears of joy. I have already begun practicing my victory announcement speech for your inevitable triumphs. But then you make a crucial error. After reviewing the official Olympic regulations, you point out a small technical detail. My lord, according to the rules, only Greek citizens can compete in the Olympic Games. Nero stops mid-stride. His face goes through several interesting colour changes. Purple, red, white, then settling on a shade of pink that suggests internal volcanic activity. Night Greek, he whispers. Well, technically speaking, my lord, you are Roman, not Greek. The roar could be heard in Gaul. Several birds fall dead from nearby trees. A statue of Venus in the courtyard develops a crack. How dare they discriminate against Romans? How dare they deny the world the opportunity to witness divine athletic perfection simply because of arbitrary geographical prejudices? This is unjust, you suggest helpfully. This is an act of war. For a moment, you genuinely fear he's going to invade Greece just to qualify for the Olympics. You can already see the headlines. Rome conquers Athens to settle discus-throwing dispute. But then Nero's expression shifts to something far more dangerous. Cunning. Actually, he says slowly, this is easily solved. We simply declare me an honorary Greek citizen. Better yet, we declare me the most Greek person who has ever lived. Draft a proclamation. I am not just Greek, I am the embodiment of Greek excellence, the living spirit of Hellenic achievement, the... My lord, you interrupt, sensing an opportunity to prevent complete diplomatic catastrophe. Perhaps we could approach this more subtly. Make some generous donations to Greek temples, sponsor some public works projects, demonstrate your deep appreciation for Greek culture? Nero considers this. Yes, that could work. But bigger, much bigger. I want to fund the rebuilding of entire cities. I want golden statues of myself in every Greek temple, with plaques explaining how I am the reincarnation of all their greatest heroes combined. I was Hercules, Achilles, Odysseus, Perseus, Theseus, the whole pantheon of legendary figures. Oh, and throw in some philosophers too. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. I've always been quite philosophical. You bite your tongue so hard you taste blood. Nero's philosophical insights tend to run along the lines of, why can't I have everything I want immediately? And, wouldn't it be great if everyone loved me without question? But you write the proclamations anyway. Within days, ships are departing for Greece loaded with gold, marble, and carefully worded documents explaining how Emperor Nero is actually the most Greek person in history, despite having been born in Italy to Roman parents and speaking Greek with an accent so thick it could be used to build roads. The Greek response is enthusiastic, suspiciously enthusiastic. Letters arrive daily from Olympic officials expressing their joy and honour at the prospect of Nero's participation. They've apparently discovered that Nero's lineage can be traced back to ancient Greek heroes through a series of genealogical connections, so creative they would make professional storytellers weep with envy. "Look at this," Nero says, waving a letter from the Olympic Committee. "They say I'm descended from Zeus himself. Through 17 different bloodlines. I always suspected as much." You read over his shoulder. The letter is a masterpiece of diplomatic fiction, tracing Nero's ancestry through gods, heroes, legendary kings, and mythical figures, with the kind of scholarly thoroughness usually reserved for religious texts. According to this document, Nero is simultaneously related to Poseidon, Apollo, Hercules, and Alexander the Great, while also being the spiritual successor to Homer, Pindar, and Sophocles. They've even found evidence that you're descended from the original Olympic founder, you report. Apparently, your great-great-great-grandmother was secretly the daughter of Pelops himself. Secretly, very secretly. So secretly that no one knew about it until this week. Nero nods sagely. The gods work in mysterious ways. This explains my natural athletic superiority and my profound spiritual connection to competitive excellence. The preparations intensify. More gifts flow to Greece. More statues are commissioned. The official Olympic roster is quietly adjusted to accommodate new events that seem suspiciously tailored to Nero's particular skill set. Lyrical performance while wearing purple, dramatic recitation of original verse, and chariot racing with artistic interpretation. And then Nero drops the bombshell that will define the next several months of your life. I've decided to arrive 3 months early. We need time to properly prepare the venues, train the local population in appropriate appreciation techniques, and ensure that every single Greek citizen understands the historical significance of my participation. Train the population, my lord. In cheering, obviously. Roman cheering is quite sophisticated. Precise timing, proper volume control, coordinated gestures. The Greeks will need instruction, and I want teachers sent to every major city to educate the masses about my various achievements, so they can fully appreciate what they're witnessing. You stare at him. You want to train an entire country how to cheer for you. Not just cheering. Proper gasps of amazement, synchronized applause, tears of joy at appropriate moments. This is going to be the most magnificent athletic and cultural display in human history. Every detail must be perfect. As you begin drafting instructions for the Greek Appreciation Education Program, you can't help but wonder if maybe being devoured by actual bears would be preferable to whatever fresh madness awaits you in Olympia. But the scrolls must be written, the plans must be made, and the emperor must be served. After all, you think grimly as you sharpen your stylus for another long night of writing imperial delusions, someone has to document this catastrophe for posterity. And unfortunately, that someone is you. You arrive in Olympia 6 weeks before the Games, which gives you plenty of time to watch Nero systematically dismantle centuries of athletic tradition with the enthusiasm of a child destroying a sandcastle. The first sign of trouble comes when he tours the chariot track and declares it insufficiently dramatic. "Where are the ramps?" he demands, gesturing at the perfectly adequate oval circuit that has served Olympic champions for generations. "Where are the obstacles? The fire pits, the wild animals?" "My lord," explains Aristophanes, the head Olympic official who has been assigned as your liaison. "Traditional chariot racing focuses on skill, speed, and tradition is just another word for lack of imagination," Nero announces. "I envision something far more spectacular. Chariots with wings, mechanical lions that roar, perhaps some sort of giant rotating blade mechanism." Aristophanes' eye develops a twitch that will become permanent over the following weeks. You make a note to send his family a sympathy gift. But the track modifications are nothing compared to Nero's chariot specifications. Standard Olympic chariots are pulled by 4 horses. Nero has commissioned one with 10. Because I am 10 times more heroic than the average competitor, he explains to the bemused craftsmen, who are somehow managing to build this mechanical monstrosity. Also, I want each horse to be a different colour, and I want them arranged in a rainbow pattern that symbolises the spectrum of my magnificence. You watch as the Imperial stable master attempts to locate horses in the exact shades Nero has specified: crimson red, sunset orange, buttercup yellow, emerald green, sapphire blue, royal purple, and 3 others in colours that don't technically exist in nature, but which Nero insists can be achieved through careful breeding and creative grooming techniques. The naming ceremony for these horses becomes an event in itself. Nero spends 2 full days christening each animal with names that represent abstract concepts of greatness. The red horse becomes glory, the orange one is destiny, yellow is triumph, green is excellence, blue is victory, purple is magnificence. The others receive names like radiance, splendor, and inexplicably moisture. Moisture, you ask, unable to contain your curiosity? Ilimorade, Haitat eregnema, Ilimorade, Haitat, precumpitus, Fadi, before moving away to bring about moments of joy. Also, I think it's a nice horse name, very moist. The chariot itself is a work of art, assuming your definition of art includes rolling golden palace that requires its own engineering team to operate. It features a throne instead of a standard racing platform, decorative columns, a small altar for mid-race prayers, and a horn section for dramatic musical accompaniment. The wheels are inlaid with precious gems that spell out Nero Maximus in 3 different languages. It's rather large, ventures the track official responsible for lane assignments. Greatness cannot be contained, Nero replies. Also, I've added retractable banners that will unfurl during the race to display portraits of my face, for inspirational purposes. But the chariot is just one event. Nero has also decided to compete in wrestling, despite not having wrestled since he was 12 and lost to his tutor's daughter. His training regimen consists primarily of grappling with silk cushions while you and several terrified servants provide enthusiastic commentary. "Magnificent takedown, my lord," you shout as Nero successfully pins a pillow. "That cushion never knew what hit it." "I am like a graceful panther," Nero pants, adjusting his practice toga. "Swift, powerful, devastating. My opponents will weep with fear before I even touch them." His foot race preparation is equally rigorous. Nero has determined that traditional running is undignified, and has instead developed his own style, which he calls interpretive sprinting. This involves a lot of arm movements, occasional leaps, and periodic pauses to strike dramatic poses. "You see," he explains while demonstrating his technique, "regular running is just about getting from one place to another, but my approach tells a story. This is the story of a hero's journey toward inevitable victory, expressed through the poetry of motion." The story, as far as you can tell, involves a lot of spinning, some interpretive gestures toward the sky, and at least 3 different victory poses per lap. It's certainly unique. Whether it's fast remains to be seen. The boxing preparations are perhaps the most concerning. Nero has commissioned special gloves that are more like golden gauntlets, decorated with relief carvings of his greatest achievements, most of which haven't happened yet. His sparring partners are trained dancers who have been instructed to fight with artistic flair and make sure every punch looks heroic. "Boxing is theatre," Nero declares while practicing his stance. "It's about grace, drama, the beautiful dance of combat. My opponents will be so awed by my technique that they'll forget to fight back." You watch him shadow box against imaginary opponents, each punch accompanied by poetic narration, and thus does the divine fist of justice meet the jaw of mediocrity. Whoosh! Behold, the uppercut of destiny finds its mark. Swish! The gods themselves weep at the beauty of this athletic expression. His javelin training involves a custom spear made of gold because regular iron is common. That's twice the weight of standard equipment and decorated with so many jewels it catches sunlight like a disco ball. Nero's throwing technique emphasizes dramatic build-up over distance or accuracy. Watch the preparation ritual, he instructs, as he begins a complex dance that involves circling the javelin 3 times, kissing it, holding it aloft while reciting poetry, and then performing what appears to be an interpretive dance about eagles. This is how you honor the weapon before asking it to fly. The javelin, when finally thrown, travels about half the distance of a normal spear, but creates such a spectacular light show that several spectators are temporarily blinded. Nero considers this a complete success. "Did you see how it sparkled?" he asks excitedly. "That's the sparkle of excellence. Traditional athletes just throw their javelins. I make mine sing." But the real innovation comes with Nero's approach to the artistic competitions. He's not content to simply perform existing works. He's written new material specifically for the Olympics. His epic poem, The Neroid, tells the story of a godlike hero, guess who must save the world through athletic achievement. It's 2,000 lines long and features a subplot about the hero's exceptional hair. His tragic drama, The Sorrows of Excellence, explores the psychological burden of being too magnificent for ordinary mortals to comprehend. The protagonist, also guess who, must struggle with the loneliness of perfection, while also winning every sporting event ever invented. "It's deeply personal," Nero explains during rehearsals. "Who among us hasn't felt the pain of being too successful, too beautiful, too talented for those around us to fully appreciate?" You nod sympathetically while making notes for the official program. The play is scheduled to run for 6 hours, with intermissions every 30 minutes so the audience can fully process the emotional intensity. His musical composition, Ode to My Own Greatness, requires a full orchestra, a chorus of 200 voices, and what Nero describes as interpretive flame effects. The lyrics include such memorable lines as, "Behold the glory of my golden voice," and "Even the gods pause their eternal labors to listen when I sing." The rehearsals become increasingly elaborate. Nero has imported musicians from across the empire, commissioned new instruments, including something called a glory horn, that's essentially a trumpet shaped like his profile, and insisted that the entire performance be conducted on a stage that's shaped like a massive golden laurel wreath. Meanwhile, you're fielding increasingly panicked letters from Olympic officials who are trying to figure out how to accommodate Nero's various requirements. The wrestling venue needs to be enlarged to fit his entourage of personal cheerleaders. The running track requires special markings for his interpretive poses. The chariot course needs reinforcement to handle his 10-horse mechanical marvel. But the most challenging request comes when Nero decides he wants to compete in multiple events simultaneously. "Why shall I wait between competitions?" he asks. "I could wrestle while singing, or throw javelins while reciting poetry. It would be much more efficient and far more impressive." "My lord," you say carefully, "the Olympic schedule is quite traditional. Each event has its designated time, and—" "Tradition," Nero waves dismissively. "I am creating new traditions. Future generations will look back at these games as the moment when Olympic competition evolved beyond its primitive limitations." You spend 3 days negotiating with Olympic officials to create combination events that will allow Nero to showcase multiple talents at once. The resulting schedule includes poetic javelin throwing, musical wrestling, and interpretive chariot racing with dramatic monologue. The other competitors, meanwhile, are beginning to arrive. Real athletes with years of training, muscles like marble statues, and the kind of focused intensity that comes from dedicating your entire life to athletic excellence. They take one look at Nero's preparations and react with expressions ranging from bewilderment to terror. Is that really his chariot?" asks Demetrius of Thebes, a 3-time Olympic champion who has won every race for the past decade. "It appears to be more of a mobile palace," you admit. "And those horses, are they supposed to be rainbow-coloured?" The emperor has very specific aesthetic preferences. Demetrius stares at Nero's 10-horse team, which is currently being groomed by a team of artists rather than stable hands. Each horse is being painted with intricate designs that complement their assigned colour scheme. Glory, the red horse, now sports golden flames along his flanks. Destiny, has been decorated with stars and lightning bolts. Moisture, you still don't understand this one, has been given what appear to be tiny painted teardrops. "I've been training for 20 years, Demetrius says quietly. "I've sacrificed everything for this moment. My youth, my relationships, my health. I eat nothing but porridge and meat. I run 50 miles a day. I've broken more bones than I can count. And he shows up with that. You pat his shoulder sympathetically. Perhaps you'd like to withdraw from the competition. I could arrange for you to receive a very generous consolation prize, a villa in Gaul, some prime agricultural land, your own small province to govern. Demetrius's eyes narrow. You're trying to bribe me to quit. I prefer to think of it as offering alternative opportunities for success. This is insane. The Olympics are about athletic achievement, not whatever this is. But even as he speaks, you can see other competitors quietly slipping away. By the end of the week, the wrestling competition has gone from 32 participants to 8. The chariot race has lost half its field. The foot race is down to Nero and 3 local Greeks, who are either very brave or very stupid. Those who remain seem to be suffering from a variety of mysterious ailments. Stomach aches, twisted ankles, sudden family emergencies that require immediate departure. One boxer claims to have developed a rare condition that makes him allergic to physical contact. It's tragic, really, you report to Nero. So many promising athletes struck down by misfortune just before the games. The gods must be clearing the field to ensure your victories are properly showcased. Yes, Nero nods sagely. Divine intervention. I expected as much. The gods know greatness when they see it, and they're ensuring that these games will be remembered for all eternity. As you watch the remaining competitors practice, real athletes with genuine skill and years of dedication, you can't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. They're about to compete in what can no longer honestly be called the Olympic Games. It's become something else entirely, the Nero Show, with special guest appearances by actual sports. But the scrolls must be written, the programs must be printed, and the emperor must be served. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this might actually be entertaining, in its own horrifying way. After all, history is about to be made. Not the kind historians usually celebrate, but definitely the kind they'll never forget. The opening ceremony is your first real glimpse of the nightmare you've helped create. Nero has decided that traditional Olympic ceremonies are too brief and insufficiently focused on individual excellence, so he's designed his own version. It lasts 14 hours. You watch from your designated scribe's position as Nero begins with a sunrise invocation to Apollo that involves interpretive dance, 3 costume changes, and a solo performance on what he calls the divine lyre. It's gold, naturally, and shaped like a miniature chariot. The crowd, which has been carefully instructed in proper appreciation techniques, responds with synchronized gasping and coordinated weeping. "Behold," Nero announces, his voice carrying across the stadium thanks to an ingenious system of bronze amplification tubes. "As I honor the gods with the most magnificent opening ceremony in Olympic history." The ceremony includes a historical reenactment of the founding of the Olympics, performed entirely by Nero in various wigs and costumes. He plays Zeus, Heracles, Pelops, and approximately 15 other mythological figures, complete with quick changes behind a portable silk screen. The effect is less epic historical drama and more one-man theatre review performed by someone having a very specific type of breakdown. But the real horror begins when the actual athletic competitions start, or rather, when they try to start. Because Nero has decided that each event should be preceded by a contextual artistic performance that helps the audience understand the deeper meaning of what they're about to witness. Before the foot race, he performs a 30-minute interpretive dance representing the journey of human potential toward divine achievement. It involves a lot of spinning, several leaps that nearly result in injury, and a climactic moment where he pretends to transform into a bird of prey. The actual runners stand at the starting line, muscles cooling, expressions glazing over, while Nero pirouettes around them. Before the wrestling matches, he recites an original epic poem called The Grappling of Souls that explores the spiritual dimensions of physical combat. It's 800 lines long and includes detailed metaphorical descriptions of wrestling moves as cosmic forces. The wrestlers, meanwhile, are forced to maintain their intimidating pre-match stances for over an hour, while Nero rhymes "mighty thou with divine sinew." But the wrestling itself is where you realize just how completely the Olympics have been transformed into something unrecognizable. Nero's first opponent is a local Greek named Theron, who has been wrestling since childhood, and whose shoulders are wider than most doorways. Theron takes one look at Nero's golden wrestling outfit, complete with decorative cape and jeweled wrestling boots, and you can see him mentally calculating the various ways this could go wrong for everyone involved. The match begins with Nero performing what he calls his pre-grappling ritual, a complex series of stretches that look more like dance moves, accompanied by dramatic breathing and several shouts of "Behold, my limber excellence!" Theron waits patiently, occasionally glancing at the judges with an expression that clearly says, "Are we really doing this?" When they finally engage, something miraculous happens. Theron, despite being obviously capable of crushing Nero like an overripe grape, somehow manages to trip over his own feet and fall down. Not once, but repeatedly. Every time he gains an advantage, he mysteriously loses his balance, or develops a sudden muscle cramp, or becomes distracted by something in the crowd. "What extraordinary luck!" Nero exclaims each time Theron inexplicably tumbles. "The gods are clearly demonstrating their favor." You glance at the judges, who are nodding with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for religious fervor. One of them is taking notes that you suspect read something like, "Remember to blink exactly 12 times during Nero's victory celebration," and "Practice looking surprised when he wins." Nero's victory technique consists mainly of falling on top of his opponents after they've conveniently collapsed. His finishing moves are theatrical poses that he holds while declaring things like, "Thus does divine technique triumph over mortal strength." The crowd responds with precisely timed cheers that sound just slightly too coordinated to be genuine. The wrestling tournament continues for 3 days, with Nero defeating opponent after opponent through a series of coincidences so improbable they could only be described as miraculous or suspicious, depending on your perspective. Muscles cramp at crucial moments, feet slip on mysteriously slippery patches of ground, competitors become distracted by sudden nosebleeds, stomach pains, and, in one memorable case, an urgent need to visit the latrine right in the middle of a match. "I have never seen such athletic fortune," announces the head judge after Nero pins his final opponent, who appears to have fainted from excitement at the prospect of losing. "Truly the gods smile upon imperial excellence." But wrestling is just the warm-up act. The real spectacle begins with Nero's entry into the epic recitation of tragic verse competition. This is where your careful documentation of events becomes essential, because what happens next will need to be recorded for posterity, even though posterity will almost certainly refuse to believe it. Nero takes the stage wearing a costume that can only be described as every Greek theatrical tradition compressed into a single blinding golden outfit. He has a different mask for each character in his performance. A cape that changes colours, don't ask how, the stage technicians refuse to explain, and a crown that somehow incorporates both laurel leaves and actual miniature chariots. His chosen piece is his own composition, the Neroid, an epic of athletic and spiritual triumph. It tells the story of a godlike hero, subtle as always, who must save the world through competitive excellence, while also composing beautiful poetry and maintaining perfect hair throughout various trials. The performance begins at sunrise. You settle in with plenty of styluses, several backup scrolls, and a growing sense of dread as Nero announces that this will be the most comprehensive artistic achievement in human history. He's not exaggerating. The epic includes 2,400 lines of verse, covers 12 different heroic adventures, features 47 distinct characters, all played by Nero, and includes 3 separate musical interludes where he accompanies himself on various instruments. There are costume changes every 30 minutes. There are dance breaks. There are moments where he pauses the narrative to provide philosophical commentary on the deeper meanings of his own work. "You see," he explains to the audience during one such interlude, having just finished a particularly dramatic death scene where the hero, himself, nobly sacrifices himself to win a discus-throwing contest. The hero's willingness to die for athletic glory represents the ultimate fusion of physical and spiritual excellence. This is why his hair remains perfect even in death. The crowd, which started the day looking politely interested, gradually transforms into something resembling a collection of wax figures. People stop blinking, jaws go slack. Several spectators appear to have achieved a state of transcendental unconsciousness while remaining technically upright. By hour 3, you notice that some audience members have actually melted into their stone seats. Not metaphorically, literally. The combination of intense Mediterranean sun and complete physical paralysis has created a kind of human marble fusion that will probably require sculptors to separate. By hour 5, birds are using the motionless spectators as perches. A family of sparrows has built a nest in one man's hair. A cat has made itself comfortable in an unconscious woman's lap and appears to be raising kittens there. But Nero is just getting started. Hour 6 brings the chariot racing metaphor sequence, where he acts out an entire chariot race using only interpretive movement and vocal sound effects. Hour 7 features the philosophical wrestling match, where the hero grapples with abstract concepts like truth, beauty, and excellence, all of whom bear a striking resemblance to Nero in different wigs. You filled 12 scrolls with notes, and are starting on your 13th, when something unprecedented happens. Someone in the audience faints, not from the heat or from sitting motionless for 7 hours, but from what appears to be sheer emotional overwhelm. Nero pauses mid-verse. "Ah," he says with satisfaction. "Tears of joy. The highest form of artistic appreciation." The fainting spreads. One by one, spectators begin toppling over, their minds apparently unable to process any more concentrated Nero-ness. But rather than stopping, Nero interprets this as the ultimate compliment. "Behold," he announces, "my artistic achievement has transcended normal human capacity for appreciation. These blessed souls are so moved by beauty that their mortal forms cannot contain their rapture." The fainting becomes epidemic. People are dropping like autumn leaves, but in their faces you can see not ecstasy, but the glazed relief of minds finally shutting down in self-defense. It's less tears of joy and more tears of merciful unconsciousness. But Nero, energized by what he perceives as overwhelming approval, launches into the epic's climactic sequence, the hero's final triumph and ascension to divine athletic glory. This section alone takes 90 minutes and includes what he describes as the most beautiful death scene ever performed, followed by the most glorious resurrection, followed by the most magnificent victory celebration. By the time he finally finishes as the sun is setting, 7.5 hours after he began, the stadium looks like a battlefield. Bodies are strewn everywhere. The few people still conscious are staring into space with the hollow eyes of trauma survivors. Several of the judges appear to have aged visibly during the performance. But the crowd's response, when it finally comes, is everything Nero could have hoped for. The conscious survivors rise to their feet with slow, dreamlike movements and begin to applaud. It's not enthusiastic applause. It's the desperate clapping of people who know that the only way to make this end is to show proper appreciation. "Standing ovation!" Nero exclaims triumphantly. "I have achieved the impossible. An artistic performance so magnificent that it has literally moved people beyond the capacity for normal human response." You look around at the devastation. The applause continues, but it has the rhythm of people clapping underwater, slow, mechanical, desperate. Some spectators are applauding while tears stream down their faces, not tears of joy, but tears of people who have stared too long into the artistic abyss and seen their own mortality reflected back at them. The judges huddle together for their deliberation, which lasts approximately 3 seconds. When they announce Nero as the winner of the epic recitation competition, their voices have the flat quality of people reading their own death sentences. "By unanimous decision," croaks the head judge, "Emperor Nero has achieved not only victory, but has redefined the very concept of artistic excellence for all future generations. His performance was so comprehensive that we lack words to adequately praise it." You make careful notes of this, though you suspect future historians will assume your handwriting deteriorated due to an earthquake or some other natural disaster. But the epic recitation is just the beginning of the artistic competitions. Over the following days, Nero dominates every cultural event with the same overwhelming thoroughness. His lyre performance lasts 3 hours and includes an original composition called The Music of My Own Magnificence that requires the audience to participate by humming along in harmony. Those who can't find the right notes are helpfully coached by imperial singing instructors stationed throughout the crowd. His tragic acting performance features an original play he's written called The Sorrows of Being Too Excellent. It's a deeply personal exploration of the loneliness experienced by those who are too perfect for ordinary mortals to understand. Nero plays all 17 characters, including the chorus of unworthy commoners who spend most of the play lamenting their inability to comprehend true greatness. "Why must I bear this burden of perfection?" he wails during the climactic monologue, tears streaming down his face as he addresses the gods. "Why have you cursed me with beauty, talent, and athletic prowess beyond mortal comprehension? It is so lonely at the summit of excellence." The audience responds to this with what can only be described as sympathetic sobbing. Whether they're crying for Nero's fictional suffering or their own very real situation is unclear, but the emotional impact is undeniable. Meanwhile, the actual athletic events continue around this artistic chaos. The remaining competitors, those brave or foolish enough to stay, begin their events with expressions of men preparing for battle. Not battle against each other, but battle against the surreal circumstances that have transformed the Olympics into something unrecognizable. The javelin throwing competition is particularly memorable. Nero's custom golden spear, decorated with enough gems to fund a small army, catches the sunlight with every movement and creates a dazzling light show that temporarily blinds several spectators. His throwing technique involves a complex pre-throw ritual that includes prayers to 17 different gods, a brief interpretive dance, and a moment where he kisses the javelin while whispering what he claims are words of encouragement. When he finally throws the spear, it travels roughly half the distance of a normal javelin, but creates such a spectacular visual display that the crowd gasps in apparent awe. The other competitors, throwing their boring non-jeweled spears that fly twice as far but without any sparkle, seem almost anticlimactic by comparison. Distance is not the only measure of excellence, Nero explains to the judges while his spear is being retrieved from where it landed dramatically but not very far in the sand. "My throw achieved perfect harmony between athletic achievement and artistic beauty. Those other throws were merely functional." The judges nod with the enthusiasm of people who have learned that enthusiasm is a survival skill. Nero wins the javelin competition for innovative technique and inspirational presentation. The foot race provides perhaps the most surreal athletic moment of the entire games. Nero has spent weeks perfecting his interpretive sprinting technique, which involves running in patterns that tell a story rather than simply getting from start to finish as quickly as possible. His race becomes a performance piece called The Journey of Excellence Toward Inevitable Triumph. He begins at the starting line with a dramatic pose that represents potential energy gathering itself for magnificent expression. When the race begins, instead of running straight down the track, he veers to the left to represent the hero's willingness to take the more challenging path. He pauses mid-race to perform a series of leaps that symbolize transcending earthly limitations. He runs backward for several yards to demonstrate confidence in ultimate victory regardless of temporary setbacks. Meanwhile, his three remaining opponents run a normal race. They reach the finish line while Nero is still performing his interpretive sequence in the middle of the track. But rather than declaring them the winners, the judges wait and wait. Nero eventually makes it to the finish line after completing his artistic journey, which includes stops at each corner of the track for brief victory poses and a final sprint that involves more dancing than running. When he finally crosses the line, approximately 5 minutes after everyone else, the judges erupt in cheers. "A revolutionary approach to competitive running," announces the head judge. "Emperor Nero has demonstrated that true athletic achievement transcends mere speed. He has elevated foot racing to the level of high art." The other runners stand at the finish line, sweat cooling on their bodies, staring at Nero as he performs his victory celebration dance. One of them, a young man named Alexios who has been training for this moment since childhood, quietly asks if he can speak with you privately. "This isn't really about athletic competition anymore, is it?" he says. "You consider your answer carefully. It's about a different kind of competition." "What kind?" "The kind where everyone wins, especially the Emperor." Alexios nods slowly. "And if someone were to actually try to win, like legitimately outperform him?" You look around to make sure no one is listening, then lean closer. I'd recommend developing a sudden injury, something painful but not permanent. A twisted ankle, perhaps, or a family emergency that requires immediate travel to somewhere very far away. However, brave. There are rumors that the Emperor is considering adding execution as an Olympic event. For entertainment purposes. Alexios goes very pale. The next morning he's gone, along with the other two remaining foot race competitors. Something about urgent business in Gaul. As the athletic competitions wind down, you realize that Nero has somehow won every single event he entered. Wrestling, boxing, javelin, foot race, and all the artistic competitions. The judges have recorded his victories with the kind of detailed documentation usually reserved for religious miracles. But the grand finale is still to come, the chariot race. This is what everything has been building toward. Nero's 10-horse rainbow chariot, months of preparation, the complete transformation of Olympic tradition. Tomorrow, the Emperor will take to the track in his golden palace on wheels and attempt to race against whoever is brave enough to remain. As you prepare your scrolls for documenting what promises to be the most spectacular athletic disaster in human history, you can't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation, not for the sport, that died somewhere around hour 3 of the epic recitation, but for the sheer unprecedented nature of what you're about to witness. After all, how many people can say they've personally documented the moment when athletic competition transformed into performance art, and performance art transformed into something that doesn't have a name yet but probably should? Tomorrow, history will be made, whether it's the kind of history that inspires future generations, or the kind that makes them question the sanity of their ancestors, remains to be seen. But either way, you will be there with your stylus ready, recording every magnificent, horrifying, unprecedented moment for posterity. Because someone has to, and unfortunately, that someone is still you. Race day dawns with the kind of perfect Mediterranean weather that seems designed for athletic greatness, which is ironic given what's about to unfold. You arrive at the hippodrome before sunrise to find Nero already there, supervising the final preparations of his chariot, with the intensity of a general preparing for the most important battle of his career. The 10-horse team is a sight to behold in the early morning light. Glory, destiny, triumph, excellence, victory, magnificence, radiance, splendor, and moisture stand in their rainbow formation, each animal groomed to perfection and decorated with enough gold leaf to fund a small province. Their bridles are studded with gems that catch the sunrise like a constellation of earthbound stars. The chariot itself has somehow become even more elaborate overnight. Nero has added what he calls victory banners that will unfurl automatically during the race to display portraits of his face in various heroic poses. The throne has been elevated another 6 inches and now includes a small altar where he can make mid-race offerings to the gods. The horn section has been expanded to include what appears to be a complete orchestra crammed into the back of the vehicle. "Behold," Nero announces as you approach, "the most magnificent racing machine ever conceived by human imagination. This chariot will not merely compete, it will inspire, it will elevate the very concept of competitive transportation to divine artistry." You examine the contraption with growing alarm. It's less a racing chariot than a mobile palace, complete with decorative columns, flowing silk banners, and enough metalwork to build a small temple. The whole thing probably weighs more than most buildings. "My lord," you venture carefully, "have you considered that the additional weight might affect your speed?" "Speed?" Nero looks genuinely puzzled. This race is not about mere velocity. It's about demonstrating the perfect harmony between athletic prowess and artistic vision. My chariot will move with the stately grace of divine purpose. The other competitors, all 3 of them, are preparing their vehicles with considerably less fanfare. These are actual racing chariots, lightweight, functional, designed for speed rather than spectacle. Their horses are trained athletes, lean and focused. Their drivers are seasoned professionals, who have been racing since they could walk. Demetrius of Thebes, the only competitor you recognize from earlier events, approaches you with the expression of a man who has made peace with his fate. "I've been thinking about your suggestion," he says quietly. "About that villa in Gaul. It's lovely this time of year," you reply. "Very peaceful, excellent hunting, no Olympic competitions for hundreds of miles." The thing is, Demetrius continues, I've been racing chariots for 15 years, won the Olympics 3 times. This was supposed to be my final race, my last chance for glory before I retire. You look at Nero's Golden Palace chariot, currently being blessed by a team of priests while musicians tune their instruments. Glory takes many forms. Does it? Because right now it looks like glory involves not getting crushed by a 10-horse musical instrument. Before you can respond, trumpets sound to announce the beginning of the pre-race ceremonies. These, naturally, have been expanded by Nero to include what he calls the epic invocation of racing excellence. He takes his position at the center of the track, wearing what can only be described as a costume that combines traditional racing gear with the outfit of a divine charioteer from classical mythology. His helmet is golden and topped with a plume of feathers from what he claims are eagles of victory. His racing tunic is purple silk, embroidered with scenes of his own imagined triumphs. His boots are leather but decorated with enough silver and gems to constitute a small treasury. The invocation begins with Nero calling upon every god even tangentially related to horses, racing, competition, victory, excellence, and artistic achievement. This takes 45 minutes and includes personal messages to specific deities, requests for favourable wind conditions, and a lengthy aside about how his racing technique has been directly inspired by divine visions. Great Apollo, he calls out, arms raised to the sky, grant that my chariot wheels may spin with the rhythm of celestial music. Noble Poseidon, let my horses run with the speed of ocean waves. Mighty Zeus, let my victory thunder across the earth like your divine lightning. The crowd responds with carefully orchestrated enthusiasm. They've been well trained in the appropriate reactions to imperial religious performances, and their gasps of awe and murmurs of approval are timed perfectly to emphasize Nero's most dramatic moments. But the real spectacle begins when Nero unveils his pre-race performance piece, the spiritual preparation of a divine charioteer. This involves a complex ritual that includes meditation poses, interpretive dance, and what appears to be a conversation with his chariot in which he asks it to channel the cosmic forces of victory. My beautiful vehicle, he says, stroking the golden side rails, together we shall achieve racing immortality. We shall move as one being, united in purpose, flowing like poetry across the sacred track. He then performs individual blessing ceremonies for each of his 10 horses, addressing them by name and explaining their roles in the upcoming artistic achievement. Glory, he says to the red horse, you shall represent the crimson fire of competition burning in my divine heart. Destiny, he continues to the orange horse, you embody the inevitable nature of my triumph. Triumph, he tells the yellow horse, you are the golden sunlight of success that follows in my wake. This continues through all 10 horses, including a particularly mystifying blessing for Moisture, whom he asks to embody the tears of joy that shall flow when mortals witness perfection in motion. Meanwhile, the other competitors wait at the starting line. Their horses stamp and snort with impatience. Their chariots creak as the drivers shift weight from foot to foot. One of the racers, a young man named Philippos, keeps glancing at the sun, as if calculating how much of the day will be consumed by pre-race ceremonies. Finally, mercifully, Nero completes his preparations and mounts his chariot. The process requires a small ladder and the assistance of 3 servants, as the throne is now elevated to a height that prioritizes dramatic visibility over practical racing considerations. Citizens of Greece, he calls out, his voice amplified by the bronze tubes that have been strategically placed around the track. Prepare yourselves to witness the most glorious chariot race in Olympic history. Today, you shall see not merely athletic competition, but the perfect fusion of sport and art, of human achievement and divine inspiration. The starting positions are announced. Nero, as the imperial competitor, has chosen the inside lane, which gives him the shortest distance to travel, but also puts him directly in the path of any accidents. The other 3 chariots line up beside him, their drivers looking like men preparing for their own funerals. The race official raises the starting signal, a white cloth that will be dropped to begin the competition. The crowd falls silent. Even the birds seem to pause their morning songs. This is it. The moment when months of preparation, political maneuvering, and complete Olympic tradition destruction will finally culminate in actual racing. The cloth drops. What happens next unfolds with the kind of spectacular inevitability that makes you understand why the gods are said to have a sense of humor. Nero's 10 horses surge forward with magnificent power, their rainbow colors creating a stunning visual display as they accelerate down the track. For approximately 50 yards, everything goes according to plan. The chariot rolls smoothly, the banners unfurl to display Nero's portraits, and the orchestra begins playing a rousing victory march. Nero himself stands on his elevated throne, like a golden statue of divine racing excellence, his arms raised in triumphant salute to the crowd. He begins shouting what sounds like poetry. "Behold, as destiny carries me toward inevitable glory. Watch as excellence propels itself across the sacred earth." The crowd cheers, the judges lean forward with anticipation. You grip your stylus, ready to record the most spectacular Olympic victory in history. And then Nero hits the first turn. The problem, you realize with crystal clarity as you watch events unfold in slow motion, is physics. Nero's chariot may be a masterpiece of artistic achievement, but it's also horrifically top-heavy. The elevated throne, the decorative columns, the orchestra section, and enough gold to build a small palace have created a vehicle that handles turns with all the grace of a marble building attempting to navigate a corner. As the 10 horses lean into the curve, the chariot continues traveling straight. For a moment, Nero appears to be racing sideways, his wheels sliding across the packed earth while his horses pull desperately to the left. The orchestra members clutch their instruments in terror. The victory banners snap and flutter like the wings of panicked birds. Nero himself seems oblivious to the developing crisis. He continues his poetic commentary. "See how my divine steeds dance with the very wind itself. Observe the graceful flow of..." And then he falls off. Not gracefully, not in a way that could possibly be interpreted as intentional or heroic. He simply tumbles backward off his elevated throne as the chariot tips, lands in a heap of purple silk and golden armor, and skids face-first across the track, while his 10 horses continue racing with his empty chariot. The silence that follows is so complete you can hear individual grains of sand settling. Nero lies motionless for a moment, a crumpled pile of imperial racing gear about 30 yards behind his still-moving vehicle. Dust rises around him, like a small, localized sandstorm. Then he pops up, bloodied, limping, covered in dirt that has mixed with his ceremonial oils to create a kind of golden mud, but unmistakably alive, and apparently undamaged except for his dignity. He raises both arms in what appears to be a victory salute. "Behold!" he shouts, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned hippodrome. "I have achieved perfect spiritual unity with the racing surface itself. This is the ultimate expression of chariot racing artistry." The crowd, trained in proper responses to imperial athletics, begins to cheer uncertainly. The judges exchange glances that communicate entire philosophical debates about the nature of victory, defeat, and their own survival instincts. Meanwhile, Nero's chariot continues its journey around the track, now pulled by increasingly confused horses who keep looking back as if wondering where their driver went. The orchestra members have abandoned any attempt at music and are simply holding on for dear life as the vehicle careens from side to side. The other 3 competitors, who had been trailing behind when Nero fell, now face an interesting tactical decision. They could easily pass the riderless chariot and complete the race in normal fashion. Or they could not. Demetrius of Thebes, in the lead position, slows his chariot to a gentle trot and calls out to his fellow racers, "Gentlemen, I believe we're witnessing a new form of Olympic competition. Perhaps we should observe and learn from this innovative technique." The other 2 drivers immediately understand. They slow their own chariots to a ceremonial pace, allowing Nero's runaway vehicle to maintain its lead while they follow at a respectful distance, like a funeral procession for normal athletic competition. Is Nero time to implement his solution to the crisis? He begins chasing his own chariot on foot. What follows is perhaps the most unique athletic display in Olympic history. Nero, still covered in mud and gold, limping slightly but moving with surprising determination, pursues his 10-horse team around the track while shouting encouragement both to himself and to his animals. "Come back, my noble steeds," he calls out. Your divine charioteer requires your assistance in completing this artistic triumph. The horses, who have been trained to respond to his voice, actually begin to slow down. The chariot gradually reduces speed until Nero is able to catch up with it just as it completes the first full lap. The reunion between emperor and vehicle becomes another performance piece. Nero approaches his chariot with the reverence usually reserved for religious relics, speaking to it in soothing tones while carefully climbing back aboard, this time using the ladder that his servants have helpfully positioned trackside. "My faithful racing partner," he says, patting the golden rail affectionately, "forgive me for allowing our spiritual connection to be temporarily disrupted. Let us complete this journey together, as destiny intended." He remounts his throne, slightly lower this time at the urgent suggestion of his engineers, and signals for the race to continue. The other competitors, who have been circling the track at a gentle canter while this reunion unfolds, obligingly resume their positions behind him. The remaining 6 laps proceed without major incident, largely because Nero has learned to navigate turns by leaning dramatically in the opposite direction while shouting instructions to both his horses and the gods. His chariot sways and creaks but remains upright, creating a racing style that can best be described as controlled catastrophe. The orchestra, having recovered from their initial terror, resumes playing victory music, though their performance has acquired a slightly hysterical quality. The victory banners flutter proudly, displaying Nero's heroic portraits to a crowd that has clearly witnessed something unprecedented in the history of competitive athletics. As they approach the final lap, Nero begins his victory celebration early. He stands on his throne, carefully gripping the safety rails his engineers have hastily installed, and delivers what he calls his chariot racing victory prophecy. "Citizens of Greece," he calls out while still technically racing, "you have witnessed the birth of a new Olympic tradition. No longer shall chariot racing be merely about speed or conventional technique. Today marks the beginning of artistic athletic expression, where the harmony between competitor and vehicle transcends normal understanding." The crowd, who have spent the entire race in a state of bewildered fascination, respond with enthusiastic cheering, whether they're cheering for Nero's innovative racing style or simply celebrating the fact that he's survived his own athletic vision is unclear. Nero crosses the finish line to thunderous applause, completing the race in what is certainly the most memorable Olympic chariot performance in history, if not necessarily the fastest. His victory banners stream behind him, his golden chariot gleams in the afternoon sun, and his 10 rainbow horses toss their heads proudly as if they too understand the historical significance of what they've just accomplished. The other competitors finish several lengths behind, having maintained their ceremonial pace throughout the race. They raise their arms in salute to Nero's victory, their expressions suggesting a complex mixture of relief, amusement, and the kind of professional respect that one athlete shows another after witnessing something that defies all previous categories of competition. The judges convene for their deliberation, which lasts approximately 4 seconds. When they announce the results, their voices ring with what sounds suspiciously like genuine enthusiasm. "By unanimous decision," declares the head judge, "Emperor Nero has achieved not only victory in the chariot racing competition, but has revolutionized the very concept of Olympic athletics. His innovative technique, his spiritual approach to competition, and his demonstration that true victory transcends conventional limitations mark this as the most significant moment in Olympic history." You scribble frantically, trying to capture not just the words but the sheer surreal magnitude of what you've witnessed. This isn't just athletic competition anymore, it's something entirely new. Performance art, perhaps. Competitive mythology, athletic theatre taken to its logical extreme. Nero's victory celebration involves another interpretive dance, this one representing the triumph of divine racing vision over earthly limitations. It lasts 20 minutes, and includes what he describes as gestures of gratitude to the racing gods for allowing mortals to witness perfection in motion. As the sun begins to set, and the crowd finally begins to disperse, you realize that tomorrow's events will feel almost anticlimactic after this. How do you follow a chariot race where the winner fell off, chased his own vehicle on foot, and still somehow managed to create the most memorable Olympic moment in history? But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight you have scrolls to write, history to document, and the impossible task of explaining to future generations exactly what they missed by not being present for the day Olympic competition transformed into something that doesn't have a name yet, but probably never will. After all, some things are so unique, they can only be described, never categorized. And what you've just witnessed definitely falls into that category. The morning after the chariot race dawns with what you're beginning to recognize as ominous tranquility. Nero has spent the night in his Olympic villa, presumably basking in the glow of his various victories. And you've been summoned for what his message describes as a celebration of gratitude and administrative efficiency. You arrive to find the emperor in his garden, reclining on a couch that appears to have been carved from a single enormous emerald. He's wearing what he calls his victory contemplation robes, silk so fine it's practically transparent, dyed in a shade of purple that doesn't exist in nature, and embroidered with thread of gold depictions of his Olympic triumphs. "Ah, my faithful scribe," he greets you with the kind of cheerful enthusiasm that, in your experience, usually precedes something terrible. "Come, sit. We must discuss the wonderful judges who made these games so memorable." You settle onto a nearby chair, regular marble, sadly inferior to emerald, but still quite comfortable, and prepare your writing materials. "They were indeed very appreciative of your performances, my lord." Appreciative, yes, exactly. Nero's eyes light up with that particular gleam that makes small animals flee. They showed such deep understanding of artistic, athletic excellence, such insight into the spiritual dimensions of competitive achievement, such remarkable ability to recognize divine talent when they witnessed it. You nod and make careful notes, though you're beginning to sense that this conversation is heading somewhere you'd prefer not to go. In fact, Nero continues, his voice taking on the thoughtful tone he uses when planning something particularly creative, their appreciation was so profound, so spiritually elevated, that I've decided to reward them appropriately. That's very generous, my lord. I'm sure they'll be honored by your recognition. Or they will be. They'll be absolutely thrilled. Nero pauses to examine his perfectly manicured fingernails, each one polished to mirror brightness. I've decided to execute several of them. You drop your stylus. It clatters against the marble with a sound that seems unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Execute them, my lord. For their own good, naturally, and as a reward for their exceptional service. Nero's expression is one of benevolent satisfaction, as if he's just announced plans to build them each a villa. You see, they've achieved the absolute pinnacle of judgely excellence. They've witnessed and properly appreciated the greatest athletic performances in Olympic history. What could they possibly do after this that wouldn't be a disappointment? I'm preserving them at the moment of their greatest professional triumph. You stare at him, stylus forgotten, mind struggling to process this logic. You want to execute the judges as a reward? Not all of them. I'm not unreasonable. Just the ones who demonstrated truly exceptional appreciation. Judge Apollodorus, for instance. Did you see how he wept during my epic recitation? Those were tears of genuine artistic understanding. Such profound emotional response deserves to be commemorated forever. By execution. By elevation to eternal glory. Think of it. He'll never have to sit through another inferior performance. He'll never have to pretend enthusiasm for mediocre athletic displays. His last memory will be of perfect artistic achievement. Really, I'm being quite thoughtful. You pick up your stylus with trembling fingers and begin taking notes, because that's what you do. You document the imperial madness, no matter how insane it becomes. And Judge Nicias, Nero continues enthusiastically, the way he nodded during my chariot race, such understanding, such recognition of innovative athletic artistry. He clearly grasped the deeper meaning of my performance. To preserve that moment of perfect comprehension, to ensure it's never diluted by exposure to lesser competitions, well, that's the kind of thoughtful gift that separates a truly caring emperor from a merely adequate one. What about the other judges, my lord? The ones who weren't quite as appreciative? Nero waves dismissively. Oh, they clearly lack the spiritual capacity for proper artistic appreciation. Executing them would be wasteful. They'd probably not even understand the honor. No, I'll just have them blinded and exiled. Much more appropriate for people of limited aesthetic sensitivity. You write this down with the mechanical precision of someone whose mind has temporarily disconnected from reality as a survival mechanism. Blinded and exiled for insufficient appreciation, executed for excessive appreciation. There's probably a middle ground of optimal appreciation that results in merely being stripped of property and banished, but you don't want to ask. There's also the matter of Judge Theophilus, Nero continues, settling more comfortably into his emerald couch. Did you notice how slowly he blinked during my wrestling performance? Slowly? Very slowly. Unnaturally slowly. Each blink lasted at least 3 seconds longer than normal human blinking. Clearly, he was so overwhelmed by my athletic artistry that his normal bodily functions became impaired. That kind of profound physical response to excellence deserves special recognition. Special recognition in the form of? Well, execution, obviously, but a particularly artistic execution, something that honors his unique appreciation style. Perhaps we could arrange for him to blink very slowly while being fed to carefully trained lions. Or maybe we could have him watch a recreation of my greatest Olympic moments while gradually being lowered into a pit of aesthetically pleasing snakes. You make notes about artistic executions while mentally calculating the distance to the nearest exit and whether your legs are still capable of running. The problem with serving as imperial scribe is that someone has to write down these conversations, and if you stop taking notes, Nero might notice and decide you're not sufficiently appreciative of his creative ideas. Oh! Nero sits up suddenly, struck by inspiration. And we simply must do something special for Judge Heraclitus. Did you see what happened during my foot race? You remember Judge Heraclitus quite clearly. He was the one whose neck made that alarming cracking sound when he nodded too enthusiastically during Nero's interpretive sprinting performance. He nodded so vigorously that he injured himself, Nero continues with delight. Physical damage from sheer appreciation. That's dedication to proper artistic response. We should honor him by arranging a similar fate. Perhaps we could have him nod himself to death while watching specially commissioned statues of my various victories. That's very creative, my lord. I think so too. It's important that executions be meaningful, don't you think? Too often people just kill judges in boring, traditional ways. Poison, stabbing, being thrown to lions. So predictable. But to craft an execution that reflects and honors the specific way each judge demonstrated their appreciation for my performances, that's the kind of thoughtful imperial administration that history will remember. You're beginning to understand why so many of your predecessors in the scribal position had such short careers. It's not just the long hours or the ink stains. It's the gradual realization that you're not just documenting history, you're documenting the creative madness of someone with unlimited power and unlimited imagination. Shall I draft the execution orders, my lord? Oh yes, absolutely, but make them artistic. I want each death warrant to be a small poem celebrating the specific type of appreciation each judge demonstrated. Judge Apollodorus gets a sonnet about tears of joy. Judge Nicaeus gets an epic verse about the beauty of proper nodding technique. Judge Theophilus gets a haiku about the spiritual significance of prolonged blinking. You spend the next 2 hours composing what are probably the first and only poetic death warrants in Olympic history. Judge Apollodorus' sonnet begins, "Tears of true appreciation flowed, from eyes that saw perfection's golden glow." Judge Nicaeus' epic includes the lines, "His noble head moved up and down with grace, acknowledging the divine athletic face." But the real challenge is Judge Theophilus' haiku about blinking. Is close slowly, soft, overwhelmed by excellence. Beauty makes time stop. Perfect, Nero exclaims when you read it back to him. That captures exactly the spiritual significance of his response. You know, I think we should have these death warrants carved into marble and displayed in the Olympic Museum. Future visitors will understand the high standards we maintained for proper artistic appreciation. As you finalize the execution orders, a thought occurs to you. My lord, what about the judges who survive? Won't they be rather upset about their colleagues' fates? Nero considers this seriously. Yes, you make an excellent point. We can't have survivors spreading negative rumors about our celebration of excellence. Better to promote them. Take a moment to the afterlife. It's really the ultimate promotion when you think about it. No more earthly concerns, no more need to worry about properly appreciating inferior performances, just eternal rest in the knowledge that they witnessed the greatest Olympic Games in history. So, you want to execute all the judges? Not execute, elevate. Though I suppose the practical difference is minimal. Nero waves a hand dismissively. The important thing is that they understand this is an honor. Make sure the death warrants include plenty of gratitude for their service and explanations of how this is really the best possible ending to their careers. You add grateful language to the poetic death warrants, which creates the surreal experience of writing thank you notes for executions. The Emperor wishes to express his deep appreciation for your professional excellence and is pleased to offer you the ultimate reward of eternal preservation at the moment of your greatest triumph. But Nero isn't finished with his post-Olympic administrative innovations. There's also the matter of my chariot driver, he announces, the one who was supposed to assist with my vehicle during the race. You remember the chariot driver, an experienced professional who had looked increasingly horrified as Nero's racing plans became clear. Last you saw him, he was heading toward the stables, with the expression of a man reconsidering his career choices. Seems to have disappeared, you report carefully. Exactly. Fled. Abandoned his post during my moment of greatest triumph. Nero's voice rises to that pitch that makes birds fall out of trees. Here I was, achieving revolutionary advances in artistic athleticism, and my own driver ran away rather than witnessing history in the making. Perhaps he was overwhelmed by the magnitude of your achievement. Overwhelmed by cowardice, by inability to appreciate innovation, by complete lack of professional dedication. Nero begins pacing, his victory robes swirling around him like purple storm clouds. Do you know where he went? There are rumours he was seen on the road to Gaul, my lord, moving quite quickly. Gaul! He fled to Gaul rather than participating in Olympic glory. Nero stops pacing and fixes you with a stare that could melt bronze. Well, we'll just have to send a message to Gaul. I want him brought back to face charges of, what should we call it? Athletic desertion? Cowardice in the face of excellence? Failure to appreciate revolutionary racing techniques? All of those sound appropriate, my lord. Yes, all of them, and his punishment should fit his crime. Since he refused to witness my chariot racing triumph, we'll arrange for him to participate in his own chariot race, against lions, while blindfolded. It will be very educational. You make careful notes about the lion chariot, bloodfold situation, while wondering if your own career might benefit from a sudden urgent family emergency in Gaul, or perhaps Britannia, somewhere very far away, where the concept of artistic athletics hasn't been invented yet. Oh, and speaking of appropriate punishments, Nero continues, his enthusiasm building like a dangerous storm, I've been thinking about the audience members who didn't show sufficient appreciation during my performances. The audience, my lord? Yes. Did you notice how some of them fell asleep during my epic recitation? Clearly they lacked the spiritual capacity to appreciate extended artistic achievement. And others were blinking at inappropriate moments, or not gasping loudly enough during my dramatic racing recovery, or failing to weep with proper enthusiasm during my tragic acting. You glance at your notes from the previous days, remembering the sea of unconscious spectators who had gradually succumbed to Nero's 7-hour performance. My lord, many of them seemed very moved by your artistry, moved to unconsciousness, which could be interpreted as either the ultimate spiritual response or complete disrespect for imperial excellence. I'm inclined toward the latter interpretation. What did you have in mind? Re-education camps, artistic appreciation schools, mandatory attendance at intensive workshops on proper audience response techniques. Nero's eyes gleam with the kind of creative enthusiasm that has historically preceded some of humanity's worst ideas. We'll teach them how to gasp at exactly the right moments, how to time their tears for maximum emotional impact, how to faint gracefully when overwhelmed by artistic perfection. That's quite comprehensive, my lord. I want to establish these schools throughout the empire. Think of it, an entire civilization properly trained in appreciating imperial excellence. No more awkward silences during my performances, no more insufficient applause. every citizen educated in the fine art of being an ideal audience. You spend another hour drafting plans for what Nero calls Imperial Appreciation Academies. The curriculum includes courses like advanced gasping techniques, synchronized weeping for large groups, the art of meaningful silence, and emergency fainting, when and how to collapse gracefully. The academic standards are quite specific. Students must demonstrate the ability to maintain enthusiastic applause for a minimum of 30 minutes without their hands going numb. They must master 17 different types of grateful tears, ranging from gentle appreciation to overwhelming spiritual euphoria. Advanced students will learn to coordinate their responses with others to create audience symphonies of perfectly timed appreciation. And graduation requirements, you ask, though you're not sure you want to hear the answer. Oh, a final examination, naturally. Each graduate must sit through a complete performance of my greatest artistic achievements, all of them in sequence, while demonstrating perfect audience technique throughout. Nero claps his hands together with delight. It will be a 3-day examination. Epic recitations, tragic drama, musical performances, interpretive athletics, plus several new works I'm composing specifically for testing purposes. You make a note that graduation from Imperial Appreciation Academy involves a 3-day endurance test that would probably qualify as cruel and unusual punishment in any reasonable legal system. What about those who don't pass the examination? Remedial education, extended study programs, additional practice with more intensive artistic exposure until they achieve proper appreciation standards. Nero pauses thoughtfully. Or execution, if they prove completely incapable of learning. We can't have people wandering around the Empire with substandard audience skills. As you write down these plans for empire-wide artistic re-education, you realize that Nero has somehow managed to turn his Olympic victory into a comprehensive plan for transforming Roman civilization into something that prioritizes proper applause techniques over military conquest, agricultural production, or basic governance. But the emperor isn't finished with his post-Olympic administrative vision. There's one more matter, he says, settling back onto his emerald couch with the satisfaction of someone who has just solved all of humanity's problems. I've decided to return to Rome for a proper triumph celebration. A triumph, my lord? The most magnificent triumph in Roman history. A parade to celebrate my Olympic victories, featuring floats depicting each of my athletic achievements, performers recreating my greatest artistic moments, and the entire population of Rome demonstrating their newly acquired audience appreciation skills. You can already picture it, a parade featuring a float of Nero falling off his chariot, dramatic reenactments of his 7-hour epic recitation, and thousands of Roman citizens who have been hastily trained in proper gasping and weeping techniques. It will either be the most spectacular triumph in history or the final proof that the empire has completely lost touch with reality. I want statues commissioned, Nero continues, showing me in each of my victory poses. The chariot racing statue should capture the exact moment when I achieved spiritual unity with the racing surface. You know, when I fell off and skidded face first through the dirt. That was clearly the artistic high point of the entire competition. Certainly, my lord. Shall I commission it in the traditional style, or... Oh, much larger than traditional. I want it to be visible from space. Well, if there were people in space, which there aren't, but you understand the principle. Monumentally enormous, and I want the expression on my face to perfectly capture the divine satisfaction of someone who has just revolutionized athletic competition through innovative falling techniques. You make notes about commissioning a massive statue of the emperor face-planting in dirt while looking divinely satisfied. The sculptors are going to love this assignment. And the inscription should read, Nero pauses dramatically, Nero, Olympius, Maximus, divine charioteer, artistic athlete, innovator of excellence, beloved of the gods, reverberatory of racing, and spiritual unifier of imperial magnificence with earthly surfaces. That's quite a lengthy inscription, my lord. Excellence cannot be summarized briefly. Though if space is limited, we could add a second plaque with additional titles. Nero the eternally victorious, Emperor of Artistic Athletics, Master of Innovation, Competition Techniques, patron saint of proper audience assolution and divine inspiration for future generations of athletes who will never achieve his level of revolutionary excellence. As you write down these monument plans, you're struck by the realization that future archaeologists are going to have some very interesting questions about Roman civilization circa 67 CE. Massive statues celebrating artistic faceplants, death warrants written as poetry, and educational institutions dedicated to teaching people how to applaud properly. It's going to be quite the historical puzzle. But duty calls, scrolls must be written, and the emperor must be served, even if serving him has evolved into documenting the most elaborate transformation of athletic competition into performance art that the world has ever seen. Shall I begin drafting the official proclamations for your Roman triumph, my lord? Yes, and make sure to emphasize that this celebration will establish new standards for imperial victory parades. No more boring displays of conquered territories and captured enemies. This triumph will feature artistic innovation, athletic revolution, and the first ever public demonstration of empire-wide audience appreciation techniques. You sharpen your stylus and begin writing what may be the strangest triumph proclamation in Roman history. As you work, you can't help but wonder what the Senate will make of an emperor who has conquered Greece not through military might, but through revolutionary chariot-falling techniques and 7-hour poetry recitations. But that's a problem for future you. Present you has proclamations to write, statue inscriptions to compose, and an empire-wide educational system to design. All in a day's work for the personal scribe of the most artistically innovative emperor in history. After all, someone has to document this madness for posterity, and unfortunately, that someone is still you. The journey back to Rome becomes a travelling festival of imperial self-celebration that transforms every town and village along the route into a temporary stage for Nero's ongoing victory tour. You ride in a specially commissioned scribe's chariot, nowhere near as elaborate as Nero's, but still featuring more gold than most people see in a lifetime, while documenting what can only be described as a completely mobile celebration of artistic athleticism. Every stop includes performances. Nero has decided that the entire empire should benefit from witnessing his Olympic victories, so he recreates his greatest moments for audiences who have no context for what they're watching, but who have been thoroughly briefed on appropriate appreciation techniques by advanced teams of imperial enthusiasm instructors. In Patre, he performs an abbreviated version of his epic recitation, only 3 hours, this time because he's feeling generous, while local officials sit in carefully arranged positions that maximize their visibility to the crowd. Their practiced gasps and synchronized weeping serve as examples for the general population, who gamely attempt to follow along despite having no idea why they're supposed to be emotionally overwhelmed by poetry about Nero fighting himself in various mythological scenarios. In Corinth, he demonstrates his revolutionary chariot racing techniques using a specially constructed miniature track and a team of trained ponies. The performance includes his famous falling-off maneuver, which he now calls the Divine Descent, and which he performs with elaborate choreography that makes it look almost intentional. The crowd responds with appreciation that sounds increasingly genuine, though whether they're appreciating the performance or simply marveling at its unprecedented nature remains unclear. But the real spectacle begins when you finally reach the outskirts of Rome. Nero has arranged for his triumph to be the most elaborate victory celebration in Roman history, which is saying something given the empire's long tradition of impressively excessive parades. The procession stretches for miles. First come the standard bearers, carrying banners that proclaim Nero's new Olympic titles in letters large enough to be read from the moon. Then come the floats, magnificent wheeled platforms depicting each of his athletic achievements in loving detail. The chariot racing float is particularly impressive. It features a full-scale replica of Nero's 10-horse racing vehicle, complete with working orchestra and automatically unfurling victory banners. The centerpiece is a golden statue of Nero performing his divine descent, captured at the exact moment when he achieves spiritual unity with the racing surface. The statue's expression conveys both divine satisfaction and the kind of determined enthusiasm that only comes from someone who has just invented an entirely new form of athletic artistry. The wrestling float shows Nero in various heroic grappling poses, locked in combat with statues representing abstract concepts like mediocrity, insufficient appreciation, and traditional athletic limitations. Each statue is being definitively defeated by Nero's innovative wrestling techniques, which appear to involve a lot of dramatic posing and interpretive gesturing. The artistic competition float is the largest of all, featuring a replica of the Olympic Theatre where Nero performed his 7-hour epic recitation. The float includes a full-size stage, a seated audience of carefully trained professional weepers, and a mechanism that allows a golden statue of Nero to rise from the center of the platform, while delivering abbreviated excerpts from the Neroid to the passing crowds. But the most remarkable aspect of the triumph is the audience participation. The entire population of Rome has been prepared for this moment through intensive workshops conducted by graduates of the hastily established Imperial Appreciation Academy. As the procession passes, hundreds of thousands of citizens demonstrate their newly acquired audience skills with synchronized precision. The gasping is perfectly timed when Nero appears on his victory chariot, a new one, even more elaborate than his Olympic racing vehicle. The collective intake of breath creates a sound like wind rushing through a vast cave. The weeping begins exactly when the Imperial Appreciation instructors raise their signal flags, and the tears flow with the coordinated beauty of a precisely choreographed fountain display. The applause follows mathematical principles that would impress professional musicians. Different sections of the crowd clap at different rhythms that combine to create complex polyrhythmic patterns, all timed to complement the musical accompaniment provided by the marching Imperial Orchestra. The effect is less like a crowd cheering and more like witnessing a massive human instrument being played by invisible gods. Nero himself is resplendent in what he calls his Triumph of Artistic Athletics costume, a toga that somehow incorporates elements from all of his Olympic competitions. The fabric is woven with golden thread depicting racing horses, wrestling scenes, and musical instruments. His crown combines laurel leaves with miniature chariots, lyres, and what appear to be tiny golden javelins. His sandals are decorated with gems, arranged in patterns that tell the story of his various victories through the medium of shoe-based art. As his chariot passes through the cheering crowds, Nero periodically stops to deliver impromptu performances. These triumph speeches become artistic events in their own right, combining oratory, interpretive movement, and audience participation in ways that transform the traditional victory parade into something closer to a mobile theatre festival. "Citizens of Rome," he calls out at one stop, his voice carrying clearly through the bronze amplification tubes that have been strategically positioned throughout the city. "Today you witness not merely the return of a victorious emperor, but the dawn of a new era in human achievement." The crowd responds with the precisely timed enthusiasm they've been trained to demonstrate. But underneath the coordination, you detect something that might actually be genuine excitement. Whether they're excited about Nero's athletic innovations or simply about witnessing something completely unprecedented in human history is unclear, but the energy is unmistakably real. "I have returned from Greece not just with victory," Nero continues, "but with proof that the boundaries between sport and art, between competition and spiritual expression, between athletic achievement and divine inspiration, are merely artificial limitations imposed by small minds." More coordinated cheering, this time accompanied by what appears to be spontaneous dancing in the outer sections of the crowd. The Imperial Appreciation Academy has apparently been more successful than anyone expected at teaching citizens to express enthusiasm, though some of them seem to be developing their own creative variations on the approved techniques. The triumph procession takes most of the day to complete its route through Rome, and by the time it reaches the Imperial Palace, both participants and spectators seem to be in a state of collective exhaustion, mixed with bewildered satisfaction. They've all been part of something unique in human history, a victory celebration for athletic achievements that redefine the very concept of athletic achievement. But the public celebration is just the beginning. Nero has planned a private evening of what he calls victory contemplation and artistic synthesis for his closest advisors, officials, and anyone else whose survival depends on demonstrating proper appreciation for imperial excellence. The private celebration takes place in the palace's largest reception hall, which has been transformed into a replica Olympic venue complete with racing track, wrestling ring, performance stage, and enough seating for several hundred carefully selected audience members. The evening's entertainment consists of Nero personally recreating each of his Olympic victories while providing detailed commentary on the artistic and spiritual significance of every moment. "You see," he explains while demonstrating his wrestling technique on a series of silk cushions, "the key to revolutionary athletic achievement is understanding that physical competition is merely the visible expression of deeper artistic truths. When I grapple with an opponent, I'm not simply trying to make him fall down. I'm engaging in a dialogue between my divine excellence and his mortal limitations." The audience responds with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for religious revelations. Whether they're genuinely fascinated or simply too terrified to look away is a question you prefer not to explore too deeply. The evening's climax comes when Nero performs what he calls his victory synthesis, an original composition that combines elements from all of his Olympic achievements into a single artistic experience. It involves singing while wrestling with imaginary opponents, reciting poetry while throwing golden practice javelins, and running in interpretive patterns while playing a lyre and providing color commentary on his own performance. "Behold," he sings, while grappling with a metaphorical representation of traditional athletic limitations, "as divine excellence triumphs over earthly constraints. Witness the birth of artistic athletics, where victory transcends mere winning to become spiritual transformation." The performance lasts 2 hours and includes costume changes, musical interludes, and several moments where Nero pauses to explain the symbolic significance of his movements to the increasingly glazed audience. By the time he finishes with a dramatic recreation of his chariot racing divine descent, complete with carefully choreographed falling and rolling across the marble floor, the spectators are responding with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from people who have witnessed something that their minds can't quite categorize. As the evening winds down and the guests begin to file out with expressions of stunned appreciation, Nero announces his plans for the future. "This is only the beginning," he declares, still wearing his victory synthesis costume, which appears to be made entirely of golden silk and strategic placement of Olympic victory crowns. "I've been thinking about expanding these concepts beyond mere athletic competition. Imagine artistic governance, where state administration becomes performance art. Interpretive military strategy, where battles are fought through dance and musical expression. Revolutionary urban planning, where cities are designed according to poetic principles." You make careful notes about these upcoming innovations while mentally calculating whether your savings are sufficient to fund a permanent vacation in some remote province where the concept of interpretive governance hasn't been invented yet. But before you can finish that calculation, Nero drops his final announcement of the evening. "And to commemorate these Olympic victories permanently," he says, "I've commissioned a special composition, a lullaby that captures the essential spirit of my athletic and artistic achievements. It's designed to be the perfect bedtime song for an empire that has witnessed the birth of artistic athletics." The lullaby, when he performs it, is unlike anything you've ever heard. It combines gentle, sleep-inducing melodies with lyrics that somehow manage to tell the story of every Olympic event while maintaining the soothing rhythms traditionally associated with bedtime music. The song includes verses about noble chariots dancing across sacred tracks, heroic wrestlers grappling with cosmic forces, and divine poets whose words carry the power to transform athletic competition into spiritual expression. But the most remarkable aspect of the lullaby is its length. What begins as a simple bedtime song gradually expands into a 45-minute musical journey through the metaphysical implications of Olympic victory. Nero performs it on what he calls his victory lyre, an instrument carved from emeralds and strung with what he claims are threads spun from solidified moonbeams. The lullaby includes a flute solo, yes, during a lullaby, performed on an instrument made entirely of precious gems that create sounds like crystalline wind chimes mixed with the distant music of celestial spheres. The effect is genuinely hypnotic, and by the time Nero reaches the final verses about eternal athletic glory and the peaceful sleep of victorious champions, half the audience has actually fallen asleep, not from boredom, but from the genuinely soporific effects of his musical innovation. As the last notes fade away and the remaining conscious spectators applaud with the careful enthusiasm of people who aren't sure whether they've just experienced a religious ceremony or the world's most elaborate bedtime story, Nero makes his final announcement. "I've decided he says with the satisfaction of someone who has just solved all of existence's remaining problems, to return for the next Olympic Games. Unless, of course, the gods demand that I take my artistic athletic innovations to even grander venues. Grander venues, my lord, you ask, though you're not sure you want to hear the answer. Well, Nero says thoughtfully, I've been having dreams about performing these competitions on the moon. Think of the artistic possibilities. Athletic achievement in reduced gravity, wrestling matches where opponents can be thrown into lunar orbit, chariot races around the celestial sphere itself. You laugh, because surely even Nero wouldn't seriously consider Olympic competition on the moon. He doesn't laugh back. Of course, he continues, the logistics would be challenging. We'd need to develop techniques for transporting chariots and audiences to celestial venues, and the judges would need special training in appreciating athletic artistry under extraterrestrial conditions. But imagine the historical significance. The first lunar Olympics, featuring revolutionary competitions that combine earthly excellence with cosmic innovation. You stop laughing and make notes about possible lunar Olympic venues, while wondering if perhaps it's time to update your will and make peace with whatever gods might be responsible for the cosmic sense of humour that has placed you in this position. But as the evening finally draws to a close and the palace settles into the quiet rhythms of night, you find yourself reflecting on what you've witnessed over these past months. Yes, it's been completely insane. Yes, it's fundamentally transformed the concept of Olympic competition in ways that future generations will struggle to understand. Yes, it's resulted in poetic death warrants, empire-wide audience training programs, and plans for lunar athletic venues. But it's also been unprecedented, unique, the kind of historical moment that occurs perhaps once in the entire span of human civilization, when someone with unlimited power and unlimited imagination decides to pursue their vision regardless of convention, tradition, or basic sanity. As you settle into your quarters and prepare your final notes from this remarkable day, you can hear Nero in his chambers, singing himself to sleep with a gentle reprise of his victory lullaby. His voice carries through the marble halls, weaving melodies about glorious chariots and divine athletic achievement, creating a soundtrack for dreams of cosmic competition and artistic excellence. You set down your stylus, roll up your scrolls, and prepare for your own rest. Tomorrow will bring new administrative challenges, fresh imperial innovations, and probably several more artistic projects that will require careful documentation and diplomatic interpretation. But tonight, as the Golden Palace settles into peaceful quiet, and the Emperor's lullaby fades into whispered dreams of lunar Olympics and celestial chariot races, you allow yourself a moment of something that might actually be satisfaction. After all, you've successfully documented one of the most remarkable chapters in human history. Future generations may not believe your accounts, but they'll certainly never forget them. And so, as the torchlight flickers against marble walls decorated with frescoes depicting Nero's Olympic triumphs, and as the gentle sound of his sleeping breathing mingles with the distant whisper of night winds through the palace gardens, you close your eyes and whisper the words that have become your traditional end to these impossible days. Good night, champion. May your dreams be filled with rainbow horses and appreciative audiences. May your victories echo through eternity, and may your next artistic athletic innovations involve fewer casualties and significantly less paperwork. Sweet dreams of divine excellence, my lord. The world has been enlightened by your vision. Sleep well, you think, as consciousness fades and you drift toward dreams, probably filled with golden chariots and interpretive wrestling. Tomorrow the madness will continue, but tonight even emperors must rest. After all, revolutionizing the fundamental nature of human competition is exhausting work, even for someone divinely blessed with unlimited artistic athletic excellence. Good night, Olympic champion. May your slumber be as peaceful as your racing style was innovative.